I am today 575 glorious days sober. The ways that I was going through life weren't working, even with quitting drinking. It was better. I had amazing freedom, but it's still... God was in my life, but he wasn't where I wanted him or where he needed to be in my life.
And I needed to trust others. And for me, that was a big thing. Having somebody else make decisions that I had no part of, it's a tough thing to give up when you're trying to accomplish certain things in life. I think for me, it comes back to that word trust again. Surrendering means trusting not only others, but trusting Jesus and the Holy Spirit, that they're going to help me through whatever situation I might be part of.
I guess during this kind of soul wrestling that I was experiencing, I hear God reach out to me and just say, it's okay, like I'm here, I have you. And I just felt his calming presence that I haven't felt in a while.
But in March, God, he came to me again, and he very loudly and clearly said to me, you're mine, and I will love you and cherish you more than any other human being in this whole world could ever.
I believe that if you are able and willing, even open-minded enough, if you take some time to reflect on your life, I think you can see God at work in your life. I really do. I think life is a great teacher, and it teaches you a lot of great things and a lot of difficult things. But if you allow it to teach you, I believe that you would see God subtly and even silently at work in the phases and stages and comings and goings of your life. And today is a day, an Easter Sunday, where Christians claim that Jesus is alive, that he is not a worldview. He's not a set of, a lens that we bring to our world, although he is that. And he's not a philosophy. He's not just a set of ideas that we kind of hold to in this cold way. No, Jesus actually is alive. This is a claim of Christianity, and this is what shaped our world here at KAC and the world in general. That Jesus Christ is not dead. He's not a worldview. He's not a philosophy. He is alive, and because he is alive, he can work in your life. And I believe if you pay attention, don't just skip by it. If you pay attention, you will and can see him at work in your life. There's a theologian, his name is John Webster. It's my favorite quote. I share it every Easter Sunday. So here's what he says. Jesus Christ is alive, gloriously and resplendently alive, because he is alive with the life of God. Jesus is alive today, gloriously resplendent. He is risen from the dead, and so he is neither inert or absent. In other words, he's not stationary and he's not far off. No, he's actually close. He's neither a piece of the past nor one who possesses himself in solitude and remoteness. In other words, he's not something that you can just say, oh, it happened a long time ago. We can move on. We go to Easter Sunday, we check that box, and then we kind of eat turkey or ham or whatever you have on the dish today. No, he's not just in the past. If he's alive today, he's relevant. And he's not far off in remoteness or solitude. No, instead, as Webster says, he is majestically and spontaneously present. He is alive, and if you allow him, encounter him today, because he is alive, not a worldview, not a philosophy. So, Christianity says that the resurrection is the grand start here of the faith. It's start here, flashing at you today. Start here. You may have a lot of reasons why you are hesitant or skeptical towards Christianity. It could be church history. It could be your neighbor who you don't like and is a Christian. It could be a lot of different reasons. There's a lot of reasons to be skeptical, but here's the thing. Disregard that for just a second and focus it on the resurrection, because if the resurrection of Jesus Christ didn't happen, you don't have to waste any more of your time. Move on from this whole thing. But if the resurrection of Jesus Christ is true and Jesus is alive today, we all have to admit that this puts him in a very unique category of people. because he was dead and now he's alive. Not many people can say that. So he must have an authority then as God who is alive today to be able to speak in and work in your life. So what you just saw, and as we've been seeing, is these different chapters of these real people just like you encountering Jesus. What I'm gonna do is we're gonna go all the way to Luke chapter 24 as Jesus enters the story of two disciples. And he meets them and encounters them in very real ways. And so if you have your Bible, would love it to be out. If not, I am glad to be your tour guide this morning as we look at Luke chapter 24. What we're reading here, the Gospel of Luke, is one of four biographical accounts of the life of Jesus. These are ancient historical documents, and Luke was written between 30 and 50 years after the time of Jesus, which may for us seem like a long time, but actually, when we think about ancient texts, it was very close to the life, ministry, and person of Jesus Christ. So Luke is a physician, he's a doctor, and Luke, as he says in his introduction, gives us an orderly account of the life of Jesus. And we're going to see that at play here. So here's what Luke chapter 24 says. It says, "Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem." He's a doctor. He's very specific. How many miles? 7. For us in Canada, 11.26 kilometers. That's how far. Now what's going on? Jesus has been resurrected from the dead. These two disciples are leaving Jerusalem. This was the place of the events of his crucifixion. They're leaving to go back to their village, what we think is Emmaus, which is how many miles? 7 miles from Jerusalem, or 11.26 kilometers, again, for us in Canada. They are walking that far. Okay, so the claim, I realize, that Jesus Christ was dead and is alive for us in the West, in the modern West, is actually a crazy thing to say. I fully understand that idea is really absent for us, kind of a post-Enlightenment scientific idea that Jesus is alive today is kind of crazy, okay? So many people throughout history have tried to wrestle with, understand, grapple with this claim. Here's the problem, though, to think as modern people that these people, of course, this is 2,000 years ago, it's before the Enlightenment, before all of this sort of stuff. Of course, these people who don't have science, they would believe that somebody who was dead becomes alive. This is just them, okay? The problem with that is the Bible itself. Because here's what Luke chapter 24, verse 11 says. In verse 9, it says, "When they came back from the tomb," these are the women who were at the tomb. They were the first to see Jesus's empty tomb, which was remarkable in its day because at the time, we don't hold to this today, but at the time, a woman's testimony was not valid in court. So the fact that the women are the first to see it is a remarkable countercultural moment of the elevation of these women, okay? So these women report back to the men, these disciples, about what has happened. And the fatal mistake then is the fatal mistake now, is that men don't listen to women. It's true, and it's not meaning to be a dig, it's actually true. Because here's what the men say after they hear the report from the women. Verse 11, "But they did not believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense." So the idea back then that somebody who is dead becomes alive was just as insane as it is to you and I today. It's just as crazy. So as people have grappled throughout history with this claim that Jesus is dead and he is alive today, there's been many, many ways that people have gone to try to make it make sense. One of the ways is called the swoon theory. Swoon, S-W-O-O-N. The swoon theory arose in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it was kind of riding the wave of what's called naturalism or materialism. This is the worldview that there is no God, there is no soul, that the only thing true about the universe is found through the hard sciences, and so this idea that somebody could miraculously come back to life is just impossible. And so these people approached the resurrection of Jesus, and this is what they said. It's called the swoon theory. The swoon theory says that Jesus, yes, was handed over to Pontius Pilate, handed over to the Romans, was crucified. As he's on the cross, the Romans thought that he was dead, but he actually was not. He still had a faint heartbeat. They took him off the cross, they put him in the tomb, wrapped him in linen, put him in the tomb. After 2 good days of rest, Jesus gets up, unwraps the linen from him. He goes to the rock that's closing his tomb, and somehow gets that bad boy rolling, and he comes out of the tomb, and he was actually alive the whole time. What they say is he never actually died. How many miles? 7 miles. So, yes, Jesus was handed over to Pontius Pilate and the professional Roman executioners. This is what they did. They murdered people, thousands of them. This is how they did it, was crucifying people. He was flogged with the cat of 9 tails, ripped all the flesh off of his bones. He carried his cross to Golgotha, the place that he was crucified. He was tortured for 20 hours, the beard ripped out of his cheeks. He was pinned to the cross. A spear was put through his side up into his lungs, releasing blood and water, which was actually significant because it's in line with what he had been suffering, or what he was suffering. You die of asphyxiation on the cross because your whole body rests on your chest and you cannot breathe. A part of the crucifixion is putting nails, yes, into the wrists, and where? Into your feet. Both feet on the cross. And then he walks 7 miles. You stub your toe. You can't even make it to your couch. Good luck. You walk as if your hips have exploded in the sockets themselves, and you drag your foot to get some relief. And what Luke tells us is he walks 11.26 kilometers to Emmaus with these 2 guys. You have to have more faith to believe in the swoon theory than you do in the resurrection. It's insane. It's actually insane. You know, 11.26 kilometers, I go to the doctors at Orchard Walk Medical Clinic. It's walking on the Trans-Canada Highway from that point all the way to the wildlife park. That's just over 11.26 kilometers. My friends, there's a lot of good reason to believe, yes, as you bring these things together, to believe that Jesus Christ actually did die and is resurrected from the grave today. If you want to know more about that, there's a lot of things, because that's an important part of how do we make this make sense, and there's some intellectual barriers. So I interviewed a few years ago a guy named Dr. Gary Habermas. He is one of the world's leading experts on the historical and bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ. He got his PhD from a secular university in Michigan State University, defending the historical and bodily resurrection, and they gave him his PhD. So you can go listen to that. It's on our podcast, anywhere you are. If you want to know more about that, go to it, because it's powerful. It's a powerful kind of outworking of this. Now, what's helpful is maybe what I just did. 7 miles, how is this possible? Swoon theory, all that sort of stuff. But here's what actually matters more than any of that line of thinking, is an encounter with Jesus Christ. An encounter with the living Christ. And that's what Jesus does from here. As it says in verse 15, as they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. So there's a sense of these guys are walking away from Jerusalem, 7 miles to Emmaus. Jesus enters the conversation, but they see him, but they don't recognize him. Like, there's a difference between seeing and recognizing. It says this, he asked them, what are you discussing together as you walk along? Hey guys, what's up? What are you talking about? It says this, they stood still, their faces downcast. They're walking and they stop and they're sad. And they look at Jesus and say this. One of them, named Cleopas, we don't know the other's name, but one of them is named Cleopas, asked him, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days? It's an ancient way to say, where the heck have you been? It would be like you maybe living in the Lower Mainland the day after the Vancouver riots, when the Vancouver Canucks lost Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final. I'm still recovering. Going to work, and everyone's talking about the riots, and you're like, what? What happened? They're like, where have you been? Everybody knows these events. That's what's going on, okay? And Jesus, I love this, verse 19. What things? Tell me. I don't know. Well, he does know, but he says what things? Okay, so here's what Jesus does, is Jesus encounters these disciples on their walk back to their hometown in 3 ways. Here's the encounters. The first encounter happens when they say, What things, Jesus asked? About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. Jesus asked, what things? And they say, oh, yeah, this is about Jesus, the prophet. The prophet. See, Jesus is standing, walking with them as the risen Savior, the God in the flesh. And what do these guys call him? Good prophet. This guy who said some good things. Yeah, mighty in word and deed, all this sort of stuff. But they fall short of identifying Jesus of who he actually is. And in this way, we see that Jesus encounters these disciples at their starting point, in their worldview. That they don't actually call Jesus God, Christ, Messiah. No, they just say, yeah, he's a good guy. Prophet, yes, said some amazing things. That Jesus listened to me in the same way that Jesus meets these people at their starting point, in their worldview, so he does today. That Jesus encounters you at your starting point. Because I recognize some people come in here and you're just here to make a family member really happy. You don't really subscribe to these things. You're here, you get dolled up maybe once or twice a year, and you come and you're just really skeptical. You're like, I don't know, this thing, I don't really understand. You maybe even would call yourself an agnostic, right? You know the story, but you're not really sure. You're like, how do you actually know this to be true? There's a whole bunch of different religions. There's a whole bunch of, I would rather just kind of weigh my options and not commit. Listen to me, Jesus encounters you in that. He encounters you in that worldview at your starting point. For others, maybe in this room, you come here as a Muslim. And in Islamic faith, this is what they say about Jesus, that he is a good prophet. He's not God, he's a good prophet. Maybe you come in here with that, and let me tell you, he meets you there. He meets you in your place. Maybe you come in a little bit hostile. He meets you in your starting point. The entire story of Christianity is God doing everything he can to meet you where you're at. And so he does here on Easter Sunday. He encounters you at your starting point. Okay, then they continue on in verse 21. It says, but we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. See, these two people in their worldview, they're Jewish disciples. And they went to Jerusalem hoping that Jesus was going to be the one to free them from foreign oppression, from the Romans, that they would get the Romans out. And so these disciples are walking back to Emmaus from Jerusalem, sad in their shattered hopes, because it didn't play out like they thought. And so Jesus here, yes, he encounters you at your starting point, but there's also good news that Jesus encounters you in your shattered hopes. And I had hoped, but here I am. I had hoped that this was going to be the year where my marriage turned the corner. In fact, it's gotten worse. I had hoped that those test results that the doctor ordered would have came back differently, but here I am in the middle of a diagnosis. I had hoped that my business would have succeeded, and yet here I am filing for bankruptcy. I had hoped that my kids would grow up and connect with me, but they don't. I don't know where they are. I had hoped that my mental health would have been better this year, but it hasn't. It's gotten worse. See, all of us, if you're honest, if you pay attention, we all came in here with a limp. We all came in here with a shattered hope. Something that you're struggling with, something that you're going through. And the good news of Easter Sunday is that Jesus encounters you, yes, at your starting point, and he encounters you in your shattered hopes without having to prove anything or rationalize it, but he enters your story. Thirdly, worldview, or your starting place, your shattered hopes. In verse 22, it says, in addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but they did not see Jesus. Here, Jesus encounters these two disciples in their disbelief, Because what did they just do? These two were able to articulate the entire events of the Easter weekend. Yes, Jesus was crucified, he was dead, and now he's alive. This is what we've heard. We know the story, but we don't believe it. They're with Jesus, they don't see him, they don't recognize him, but they know the entirety of the story. And so Jesus, my friends, meets you in your disbelief this weekend. He meets you at your place, because I think, especially living in the West, we're kind of haunted by Christian ideas and values. And so there's many people who can say, yeah, I get it. Jesus died, and something about sin, and something about the grave, and something about Leah. You can articulate this story, but you don't believe. In fact, you don't even know somebody else who believes. And so the idea of adhering to this type of thing is actually so distant for you. They know it, they hear it, but they do not believe. My friends, regardless of where your starting point is, or your shattered hope, or even your disbelief, here's the beautiful thing of this moment, is that Jesus enters their story. He doesn't interrupt them. He doesn't correct them. He sits with them in it. So the spoiler alert is this, is that these two disciples do recognize him eventually. And Jesus does encounter them. He does reveal himself, and he does it in two ways. He first does it with a Bible study, and then he does it at a table. So let's keep this story going. In verse 25, it says, he said to them, how foolish you are and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Remember, they just called him a prophet, and you're like, he says to them, read the prophets. They actually spoke about me. The whole story culminates in me. It says, verse 26, did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? What he's saying is, let's do a little Bible study, guys. All right? And he brings them to these pages of the Old Testament, and he says, the entirety of this part of the Bible just talks about me. So think about it. He starts to say this in verse 27. And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. He leads them in a Bible study. Now, I grew up in church, so I've been through a lot of snoozer Bible studies. I guarantee you this was not a snoozer, because Jesus himself is opening up the scriptures and he's saying, okay, so Adam, yeah, I'm the second Adam, right? So the sacrificial lamb, that whole thing, that's actually me. Okay, so David the king, yeah, I'm the true king, right? Moses the priest, I am the... So he's literally leading them all the way through the pages of the Old Testament saying, it's all about me, fellas. And you think you know your Bible. You missed me. You see me, but you don't recognize me. There's a difference. So for our sake this morning, I want to summarize to you the Old Testament. What is the Old Testament, and how does it culminate in the story of Jesus? If you're to take the time, there's a lot more than this. But the Old Testament, besides the first two chapters of the Old Testament, is all about one word, a predicament. If you read the Old Testament, it's about a people who never can get it right. These are the people that want to go this way, but they always seem to drift this way. These are the people who overpromise, I'll do it, and who underdeliver all the time. These are the people who deal with death and decay and destruction and drunkenness and all the stuff. They live in a world of war, of calamity, of geopolitical tensions. The people of the Old Testament know the cul-de-sac that some of you know, I would say all of us know very, very well. And the cul-de-sac sounds like this. I know that I don't want to be that type of person. I don't like this activity, this perspective, my anger. I know that I need to change. So I feel bad about that, so I want to change. I'm reading about change. I think I'm changing. I feel good about myself. This is going really, really well, and I blew it again. And then you go again. I know I don't like this. I wish I could stop spending the money that I don't have. I know that I treat people terribly with my anger. I'm changing. I feel good about myself. Look at me. I'm really doing it. Blew it again. And they're in this cul-de-sac of rinse, repeat over and over and over again. And so here's my point, is that if you read the Old Testament, what you're going to see is a predicament. And if you are open-minded and brave enough, you're going to say, I know what that's like. I know what it's like. I feel it. So here's the thing, is that in order for you to have this encounter with Jesus, one of the things is you have to acknowledge a predicament. You have to acknowledge something. There's something in your life. And so if you are honest enough, reflective enough, if you can actually stop scrolling on your phone for a few minutes and take stock of your life, I believe your life is telling you you're in a predicament. You may even have people in your life telling you that you're in a predicament. Hey, you know what it's like to live with you? Not very fun. We see, but we do not recognize. And so the story of the Old Testament is about the human predicament because something we call sin, it is broken. There's a fracture, there's death, there's decay, there's all these things. It's about a predicament. What else is the Old Testament about? Oh man, there's good news that the Old Testament is about provision for your predicament. Because if you read the Old Testament, God pursues these people despite of themselves. He is relentless in his loving faithfulness to them. When they are faithless, he is faithful. When they are poised towards destruction, he comes and saves them. That his love and grace are the things that these people are identified by. More than their predicament, they're identified by the pursuing love of God. Okay? So all of this story, Jesus is saying, leads to what? The cross. Because what do you see in the cross? The cross is your predicament. The limp that you bring into this morning. The thing you want to change but can't. The isolation, the meaninglessness. The sense of I've achieved everything I've wanted to, but I still don't feel complete. All of that, that is the human predicament on the cross, that Jesus dies as a human for you on the cross. But as God, he is a provision for your need. He is a provision for your need. And so all of the decay and the destruction and the fracture that you and I feel in our world meets on the cross. And because of the resurrection of Jesus, all that is sad and wrong becomes untrue because Jesus is victorious over all of your predicament, both now and for the future, for eternity. This is the good news of Easter Sunday. And yeah, you can get excited about that. I think it's good news. So Jesus here shows them through a Bible study, and they encounter him through this Bible study. The second way that he reveals himself is at a table. It says, verse 28, as they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, stay with us, for it is nearly evening, and the day is almost over. So he went in to stay with them. So what's going on is Jesus is, there's Emmaus. Jesus keeps walking as if he's going on further. And these two guys in classic Middle Eastern hospitality says, hey, come on in, stay with us. We got lots of hummus. Come on in and enjoy some food with us. I would stay. I love me some hummus. So he goes and they enter. So this is them being hospitable. Verse 30. When he was at the table with them, he took the bread. This is not Middle Eastern hospitality because the host is the host of the meal. But Jesus takes leadership of this moment. As he did with his disciples in Passover, he now brings them to that moment. And he presides over this meal. He took the bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. It's around a table, relationship, where God in Christ reveals himself to these people. So my guess is that you have a dinner or something to go to from here. Some of the best times we have is around a table with good food. This is what Jesus is sharing with these two disciples, relationship. And here's what happens. He broke it and gave it to them. Verse 31. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him. Oh, something dramatic happens is that they go from seeing to recognizing. They go from acknowledging to experiencing. They go from the laboratory to relationship. Because here's what happens. Their eyes are open and they recognize him and he disappeared from their sight. So Luke doesn't give us more details. He was there, they recognize and see him, and then he's not there. And here's what these disciples say. They asked each other, were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened up the scriptures with us? They ask each other, how did we miss it? He was with us the whole time. How did we miss it? Because there's a difference between seeing and recognizing. Because Jesus was hidden in plain sight in front of them, and for whatever reason, they didn't see. So I asked my wife if I could share this. That's important. So a little while ago, she would know the exact day, time, weather, everything. It was a little while ago. It was like a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I'm not really sure. So we are getting ready for the day. We're in our bathroom. She's doing her hair. I'm brushing my teeth, whatever. We're getting ready. And we're talking about our finances, okay? And I know this doesn't happen to anybody else in this room, but it wasn't an argument or a fight, but it was getting real close. Like, it was one of those moments in marriage where you're kind of navigating the landmines, right? You're like, if I say, I don't want to say that. Oh, that's not good, right? So I know that doesn't happen to anybody else, but it was happening to me. And so we're having this conversation. Let me just call it was a very intentional conversation. We're talking about this and trying to get on the same page and understand each other and stuff. And I am standing right in front of the window, and the morning sun is shining at the back of me. And without breaking cadence, my wife looks at me and says, "You have ear hair that needs to be plucked out." Like it was a natural part of the conversation. I'm like, you gotta do what you gotta do. So she goes against the tweezers. It's like we just press pause on the finance conversation. She comes, plucks these ear hairs out of my ear. I'm almost 40. I guess this is what happens when you're almost 40. And so she plucks them out, and then we just continue on the conversation like nothing ever happened. And afterwards, I howled with laughter at what just occurred. It's like, what in the world? How is it possible that I look at myself in the mirror every single day and I don't see those things? Like, and I pride myself on trying to take good care of myself. I've flossed my teeth a lot. I try to make sure that it's all there. But what I didn't see was these things fluttering in the wind. It's awful. It's awful. So, of course, we can joke and laugh a bit, but how true is it actually in your life that you see things, but you don't actually recognize them? Like you see and you kind of know that you're in a predicament. Whatever it is, if finances or relationship, or there's a limp that you bring, your shattered hopes, whatever it is, like there is that predicament, but you don't actually do anything about it. You see it, but you don't recognize it. That you and I have such an ability to not care and distract ourselves from the things that ultimately matter. So you just kind of flutter around from pleasure and pleasure to pleasure to pleasure until you die without really ever thinking about the resurrection of Jesus. You see it, you know it, but you don't ever do anything about it. You don't recognize it. My friends, this is the encounter from knowing about Jesus to seeing him and recognizing him. So, and it's such a privilege. Like I was saying to people, as a pastor, if you can't get excited to preach on Easter Sunday, you should quit. Like, you just got to go do something else. So, man, I'm thrilled to be here. But I'm actually really terrified too. Because it is impossible to tell modern people like you that Jesus is alive. He is not a worldview. He is not a philosophy. That he is alive. And if you are open-minded enough, reflective enough, you can see him at work in your story and that you can encounter him. It's like, if it were possible, it would be like trying to convince a fish that they swim in water. They don't know. They're just a fish. They're just swimming in the water. Me saying to you, Jesus is alive, it's like, yeah. You don't actually see it. Like, it's impossible for me to tell you that. It's impossible for me on Easter Sunday to convince you, to persuade you, to open up your mind and your heart to the idea that Jesus is alive and real, can work in your life. Because you're a Westerner. with a smartphone, with decent amounts of comfort, a lake house, a portfolio, things that you just kind of do. So for me to be up here waving my arms and saying, hey, there's actually probably more to life than what you're experiencing, it's impossible for me to tell you that. It's impossible for me to come to you because we know just naturally that if a judge is presiding over a case and has a conflict of interest in the case, we all know that they have to recuse themselves. Why? Because they can't objectively say this or that. Because why? They have a vested interest in it. You see, it's the same with Christianity. Jesus comes and says, in order for you to find your life, you actually have to lose it. You have to give up what you think is a flourishing life and mold your entire life around the person, teaching, ministry, and existence of Jesus Christ. You have to give up something, but you gain something way more. But how do you do it? You got to lose your life. Yet, you sit as the judge of your own life, but you can't recuse yourself. What I'm saying to you is that we all have deep layers of prejudice against the idea that a holy God can make demands of us. That you have a vested interest against Christianity because of its claims. You got to lose the life that you've built in order to find Jesus. That you actually cannot be objective when it comes to this. And so, what's the way forward? It seems impossible. The way forward is an encounter. Is an encounter with the living Christ. Because he comes into your starting point, your ethnicity, your hostility, your skepticism. He starts there. That's fine. That doesn't bug him. He enters your shattered hopes, the thing that you wish you weren't facing, feeling, knowing now. He comes in even into your disbelief. It doesn't freak him out. But here's the thing, is that Jesus, because he is alive today, he is spontaneously and majestically present in this moment. And there is an encounter, and people encounter Jesus all the time. And so we are praying that you would encounter Jesus today. Because I can come up here and I can tell you about 7 miles and the nail and all that sort of stuff, and that's good and it matters. But here's the thing, is that for some of us, Jesus needs to move from the lab to the table. And if you are willing, open-minded enough, I think you can see him at work in your life, even in this moment. Scriptures are clear. If you seek him, he will be found. But the good news, my friends, the good news of Easter Sunday is that God in Christ Jesus has done everything he can to come and find you wherever you're at. And he can enter your story. So we're going to continue chapter 3 of these normal people exactly like you with their predicament and the provision of God. So check out the screen.
He's shown me that I don't need to stay in this place of isolation. I don't need to be afraid anymore. I could just walk beside him and we'll figure everything out together.
Everything, all the pain, all the hurt, everything just left. It was like, I don't have to carry this anymore. I don't have to pretend anymore to be somebody I'm not. It's just, I thought I was free when I quit drinking. Well, this is like, woohoo, this is like so amazing. Yeah.
I'm thankful to Jesus because he didn't give up on me. Because there were times when I had given up on him, and that was unsettling. So for me, it was a very large breakthrough to be able to have that respect of Jesus broadened in my life. I feel that there's someone I can talk to. I understand now that he's listening, And it really helps me to be able to process my day in a more positive note.
I am most thankful to Jesus for his kind way of leading me down a path I thought I did not want to go down. I was too scared to go down, but he didn't make me go down that by myself. He literally was carrying me. Truly, like, I just want to jump up and down right now. I don't want to sit on this couch. I want to be, on a mountaintop hollering, everybody, like, you just need to go this way. You just need to trust him.